This week's episode of Ask Mr. Wonderful begins with an email, a message that arrived like so many others, but carried within it a question of such earnest and fundamental curiosity that it deserves a journey of its own. It's from a young woman named Yasmina, and her words paint a vivid picture of a life on the precipice of its own great adventure. She introduces herself as a huge fan of Shark Tank, a dedicated viewer for the past 8 years, which tells me she's been studying the world of business and ambition from a young age. She's just graduated and is on the threshold of her college years, a time of immense possibility and profound uncertainty. Her first term, she anticipates, will be a virtual one, a modern reality dictated by our times, broadcasting lectures and seminars directly into her parents' basement. Yasmina, that situation you describe is indeed a sign of the times. It's a shared experience for so many of your generation, a strange and unprecedented start to a new chapter, but a start nonetheless. She continues, her ambition clear and unwavering, stating that her plan is to become an entrepreneur. She has the will, the fire, but not yet the specific path. She doesn't know what industry she'll conquer or which business sector will capture her imagination. And I understand that completely. Life, especially when you are just setting out for the grand experience of higher education, is precisely like that proverbial box of chocolates. You have absolutely no idea what you're going to get next. The person you are today is not the person you will be in 4 years. The passions that drive you now may be replaced by new ones you can't even yet conceive. I get it, Yasmina. Then, with a respectful and thoughtful tone, she gets to the heart of her message. She observes, quite correctly, that in all the years of Shark Tank and all the pitches and all the deals, she doesn't believe I ever told the full story of how I made my very first $1 million. She asks, with a charming directness, if she can be the one to finally ask that question. What she wonders, can she learn from that experience? She prefaces it with an understanding that I might not want to answer, but her genuine desire to know, to learn from the path I walked is palpable. Okay, Yasmina, you've got me, you're right. I have never publicly in that forum detailed the entire sequence of events that led to that first major financial milestone. And perhaps you are also right that there are interesting and, more importantly, actionable lessons to be learned from that story. The journey you are just now embarking upon, sitting in that basement with a world of digital information at your fingertips, is in many ways a mirror of the journey I started, albeit in a very different analog world. Maybe the most valuable thing I can offer is not a blueprint for success, but a map of the pitfalls. I can tell you about the mistakes I made, the wrong turns I took, because understanding those errors might be infinitely more valuable to you than a simple chronicle of triumphs. I wouldn't want you, or any other aspiring entrepreneur, to stumble into the same holes I did. I truly believe that any successful entrepreneur has a duty to pass forward the knowledge they have gained to create, so to speak, a path of least resistance for the next generation. So let me give you some ideas on what not to do, and perhaps within that tale, you'll find the answers you're looking for. Let's pick up the story right where you are now. Off to college, I remember that time vividly. I had a conversation with my stepfather, a man of immense pragmatism. I told him, with all the romantic idealism of a teenager, that I wanted to be a photographer or a rock star. I envisioned a life of creativity, of art, of capturing moments or creating anthems. He looked at me, not with unkindness, but with a stark dose of reality. You're nuts, he said. You'll starve to death doing that. He explained that the world of arts is brutally competitive, a place of binary outcomes. You're either at the very top, a world-renowned photographer or a chart-topping musician, or you're struggling to make ends meet. He was blunt. You're not a good enough photographer to stay competitive in the commercial world, he assessed. And frankly, I've heard you play your guitar, and you've got a long, long way to go. At the time, it felt harsh, but it was the truth. And sometimes the unvarnished truth is the greatest gift you can receive. So with my artistic dreams temporarily shelved, I went to college. I thought, well, what's a practical path? What kind of degree leads to a job? Engineering. That seemed like a safe bet. Engineers get jobs. So I enrolled in Engineering 101, ready to embrace a world of physics and calculus. At the same time, I hedged my bets. I enrolled in some psychology classes. My primary motivation, I must admit, was to meet some girls. And I also signed up for a course in a brand new, almost unheard of discipline at the time, environmental studies. It was a nascent field long before it became the global conversation it is today. My first class in engineering was a rude awakening. Whoa, the level of difficulty, the abstract thinking, the sheer volume of work, it was staggering. And I have to be honest with you, Yasmina, I wanted to party. I wanted the full college experience, and that didn't involve spending all night in the library with a slide rule, so my tenure in the engineering department was brief. I spent the next 4 years immersed in psychology and environmental studies. Life has a funny way of introducing catalysts when you least expect them. In my 3rd year, I met a girl. It was my first serious relationship, and we eventually moved in together. She was wonderfully artsy, a free spirit who saw the world through a creative lens. She saw the dormant photographer in me and encouraged it. But she pushed me further. She convinced me to sign up for a night class in cinematography. Advanced cinematography, no less. I was into still photography, but I had never worked with moving pictures, with film. In those days, it was a complex mechanical and chemical process. It wasn't the digital world of today where you can shoot and edit on a phone. This was tough, but I was instantly captivated. I got really into it. Those night classes became the center of my universe. 3 hours of intense instruction, followed by endless hours of filming. Then the painstaking process of editing, cutting, and splicing actual film. We would talk for hours about the theory of filmmaking, about light and shadow, about storytelling. I was falling in love with the girl. But I was also falling deeply in love with cinematography itself, with the vast potential of what it could be to become a filmmaker. It reignited that artistic bent I had suppressed, but I was also acutely aware that this was not a place to make money easily. But here's where the journey takes a turn. As I became more involved in the local film community, a network began to form. People saw my work, my dedication. They started to say, hey, we've seen some of your camera work. It's good. Can we hire you as a cameraman for an industrial shoot? Or it would be a local sports event or a small commercial. They just needed camera guys, and I was eager. I was learning the tools of the trade in the most practical way possible. I was learning how to be a professional cameraman, how to budget for film stock, how to plan a shoot, whether it was an industrial film or a television commercial. I became a sound guy, a lighting guy. When you're part of a small independent crew, you do everything. I was a sponge, soaking it all up. And I was absolutely loving it. The work was grueling. I would go to school all day, then shoot all night, and spend my weekends in a darkroom editing. But when you are truly passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work. You don't mind working 25 hours a day. And believe me, it was an incredible formative time. Eventually, I had an 8-plate Steenbeck editing machine, a massive, complicated piece of equipment right where we lived. I was cutting film, processing it, mixing sound, doing everything from start to finish, all while finishing my undergraduate degree. I graduated. I got great marks in psychology and environmental studies. I went home, degree in hand, and my dad looked at me with that same practical wisdom my stepfather had years before. Well, he said, how are you going to get a job with this? The environmental movement hadn't taken off yet, and a bachelor's in psychology without a PhD or a path to research was a tough sell in the job market. He was right. He was always right. And then he gave me a piece of advice that would change the trajectory of my life. He said, why don't you go get a business degree? I know you still want to be a filmmaker and a musician and a photographer, but why don't you get some tools, some fundamental building blocks about business? Because even if you pursue any of those artistic disciplines, you're still going to need to know the basics of business to run your own life and career. It was a brilliant suggestion. It wasn't about abandoning my passion, it was about empowering it. So I applied to business school and I got in. And this, Yasmina, is where the serendipitous nature of life, that box of chocolates, really starts to reveal itself. I'm sitting down with the dean of the business school just after I've been accepted, and I say to him, Dean, listen, I'm going to be here for 24 months getting this MBA, and I bet you have an ongoing need to recruit the best students from all around the world. I proceeded to pitch him. Why don't you let me make a film about this experience? I'm a filmmaker. I'm here to get a business degree, but I know how to make films. I can hire a crew, document this entire 2-year journey from the first day when students meet each other through the late night study sessions, the classroom debates, the stress, the triumphs. I can give you the inside story of what it's really like to pursue a business degree in such an intense program. Because MBAs are tough. You burn a lot of hours, you work every single day of the week. The dean was intrigued. He said, let me take it up with a few of the faculty members. I'll raise the flagpole and see if anyone salutes. I added one more thing. It's going to cost about 50 grand. I have to hire people, rent cameras, lights, sound equipment, pay for film stock and editing time. He paused and said, Let's wait on the budget. Let me just find out if there's any interest. 2 days later, as I was just starting the program, he called me into his office. There's a lot of interest, he said, but you're going to have to do it for $30,000. I didn't hesitate for a second. Done, I said. It was one of those deals, a foot in the door. That was the beginning of a truly remarkable experience. I had one more condition. Dean, I said, I can't do the full rigorous MBA program and shoot a feature-length documentary for 2 years. You've got to cut me some slack. Give me a couple of credits for this project and mark the film based on its merits. If it's a crappy recruiting tool, I should get a low mark. But if it's a really good film, you should score it highly, just like any other class. We made that deal and I went to work. Shooting that film was a crazy experience. I was a student and a filmmaker, simultaneously living the story I was trying to tell. But when it was over, 24 months later, the film was a unique, authentic insight into the program that no outsider could have ever created. It was a fantastic tool for recruiting. They showed it to every prospective student, sent copies all around the world. I got a huge score on the project and graduated right up there at the top of my class. Now, having shot that film, I had built a team, crew I trusted. I said to them, guys, why don't we form a company together? We're really good at this. Let's formalize it. There was a guy named Dave Thomas, an incredible writer who would go on to do amazing things in sports television and documentary filmmaking. And another guy, Scott McKenzie, who was more focused on the nuts and bolts of production. And then there was me. I wanted to use my newfound business tools. I wanted to budget, to strategize, to be a cameraman, and to build something. We were really good at it. We called our company Special Events Television. We understood that to create value in television, you have to create a unique, ownable format. I think of a show like Friends, that's a format. Somebody owns it, and nobody else can make it. We applied that principle to sports television. We created sports formats like Bobby Orr and the Hockey Legends. We secured a huge sponsorship from a major food company. We did a show called The Original Six, where we got retired hockey stars from the original 6 NHL teams to play against each other. It was wildly successful. We made great television, and then we struck gold. We created a show called Don Cherry's Grapevine. Don Cherry, the eclectic, flamboyant former coach, was a fantastic television personality. He brought his dog on set. He was a great interviewer. The format caught on fire. The company's growth was explosive. We were selling the shows every week, broadcasting them everywhere. I looked at my partners and said, wow, look at this. Just 2 years later, we got an offer. The company was bought out. It was my first transaction, my first exit. And I thought, this is good. It was an incredible experience. We started with absolutely nothing and created a company that was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to each of us. As that chapter was closing, I was already looking for the next thing. I had enrolled in a night class about computers. I was using a machine called an Osborne, the first portable computer ever made, running a clunky operating system called CPM. In that class, I met a guy named John Freeman. John was a quiet executive at a giant oil company, but he was also a brilliant programmer. He had designed a program that could drive Hewlett-Packard plotters, which were machines that used pens to draw graphics on an XY axis. In my television days, making graphics and titles was incredibly expensive and time-consuming. There was no digitized technology at that point. John showed me how he could use his software to make complex graphics. A light bulb went off in my head, a massive one. I looked at it and said, John, every single person who buys a plotter from Hewlett-Packard is going to want one of these software packages. Let's form a partnership. I'll market this stuff and you'll write the code. I will fly all around the world and convince the plotter companies to bundle your software with their hardware. John was hesitant. But I can't give up my job, he said. I have a family, I have kids. I said, look, you write code all night and on weekends I don't have a job, I just sold my company. I remember sitting on the red chair in my living room brainstorming names. We settled on Softkey, S-O-F-T-K-E-Y. Softkey software products. That was the beginning of a monumental journey. John wrote the code, we packaged it up, and our first product was called Key Chart. Every product we made had key in the name. I flew down to San Diego to meet a woman named Mary Zoller, who was running the plotter division at HP, the market leader. I put on a show for her. I said, Mary, you have to bundle this. I'll do it for $12 a unit. She just laughed at me. At least she was honest. Kevin, she said, I'm the #1 plotter on earth. Everybody writes code for me. What do I need you for? Maybe you should talk to some of my competitors. It was one of those moments, like when your phone makes that bing sound when a message comes in. An idea arriving with perfect clarity. That's exactly what I did. I went to all the Japanese competitors the German competitors, everyone who was trying to chip away at Hewlett-Packard's dominance. I said to them, what if you could offer free software with your plotter? What if that could be your competitive edge? And boy, did that work. We sold millions of copies of KeyChart bundled with all these different plotters. In the end, I think we were only getting about 12 cents a copy. But the volume was so immense that we were making a ton of money. And we just kept going and going, developing more key products, expanding our distribution, growing the business relentlessly. Now here's where I think the first million comes in. The dot-com era was just beginning, and my phone started ringing off the hook. Everyone wanted to invest in my company. I called up John and said, John, what do you want to do, buddy? He was happy. He said, look, I'm just happy with the graphics business. You want to make this thing huge? Why don't you buy me out and you go on your journey? I said, I'm cool with that, John. And I think John is a pretty happy guy today. He took some cash, he took some stock, and he was a founder of what was becoming a software giant. We just kept going, did dozens of products, became a huge presence at trade shows like Comdex, and got bigger and bigger. A bunch of private equity guys invested in us. And then one day, a banker came to me and said, why don't we take SoftKey software products public? I said, work with the finance guys, put a deal together, and I'm happy to take it public. I'll never forget the morning we went to the exchange. I woke up in the morning and I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw the stock was trading from the pre-market activity. I looked at the stock price and I looked at the number of shares I owned, and I went, holy. It was the first time it ever truly hit me. I'm rich. It was never about the money. When I was in the trenches building the business, and when I talk to entrepreneurs today who have had that same rocket ship experience, from their basement to a massive liquidity event, they all say the same thing. They weren't thinking about the money. It's the journey. It's the passion for the business, for solving the problem, for building something from nothing. That's what got me going. That was my first $1 million. In reality, it was way more than $1 million, but the point is, it was binary, it was zero, and then it was a lot. It wasn't a gradual accumulation, it was an event. This whole entrepreneurial journey, for most people I talk to, has a unique crystallizing moment, an origin story. For me, that moment happened long before SoftKey, long before the MBA film. It happened when I was in grade 11 in high school. I got my first job. I wanted that job because the girl I was interested in was working at the shoe store across the mall, and this was an ice cream store that was looking for a scooper. So I took the job. The first day I was there, the owner, a woman, said to me, when you give out the little free samples of ice cream, on those tiny plastic spoons, people take their chewing gum out of their mouths and they throw it on the floor. The store had these beautiful Mexican tiles, and the gum would get stuck on them and turn into ugly black smudges. At the end of the day, I shut down all the ice cream bins, cleaned the counter, and I was ready to get on my bike and go home. And she said to me, scrape the gum off the floor. You can't leave before you scrape the gum off the floor. I knew the girl from the shoe store was watching me, waiting for me to finish so we could go get a soda together. I was really looking forward to it. And I said to the owner, I can't. You hired me as a scooper, not a scraper. I'm not going to get down on my hands and knees. The real reason, of course, was that I didn't want that girl to see me on my knees scraping gum off the floor. And she said, no, you're an employee. You're going to do exactly what I say. Now, get out of my ice cream store. You're fired. Within minutes, I was on my bicycle, riding home in utter shame and shock. I was stunned that she had that kind of control over my life, over my destiny. That moment changed my life forever. I made a vow to myself right then and there. I have never, ever in my life worked for someone again, ever. No one has ever had that kind of control over me ever again, and no one ever will. That was another one of those moments where the lights go on, and I realized a fundamental truth about the world. In life, there are two types of people. There are the people that own the store, and there are the people that scrape the gum off the floor. And you have to decide which one you want to be. I'm not dissing being an employee. There is nothing wrong with that. It's a different life. And if you want that security, that's cool. You can be a great employee. But I didn't want to be an employee. I never wanted someone to have that kind of power over me ever again. And it was that woman, the owner of that ice cream parlor, who was the reason. I owe her so much for twisting me that day. I never had a full-time job again in my life. I only worked for myself from that day on. That was the true beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. So Yasmina, if you have found that I am answering your question, it's because you have to have that kind of catharsis. You have to make that fundamental decision that you are going to take the path of entrepreneurship. It's not for everybody, but if it's in you, you'll know. So I say to every entrepreneur that's starting their journey or contemplating it, do not go after entrepreneurship out of the greed of money. You will never find it. It is about a passion for personal freedom. And the only way you are going to make your first $1 million, and this is a material challenges that you have to solve a problem for somebody. And if you solve that problem for one person and it's a similar problem that millions of other people have, that is the core of what a business is. Entrepreneurs see problems, they find solutions, and that's how they create a business. Businesses are always at their heart about solving problems for people. So your first job, if you're pursuing your first million, is to find a problem worth solving. It is not easy to make $1 million. I've said it many times, it's one of the most difficult tasks on earth because you're starting a business and it doesn't happen overnight. And then making the first 5 million is next to impossible. The strange thing is, and maybe it makes intuitive sense, that building wealth past that point is about a different skill set. It's about investing. You make your first million as an operator and then you become an investor. Today, I am an investor. And I must say that I have learned so much on this road. The journey I've had has been my greatest education.